Really honored and proud to have him here. Again, I think it's cool now that I don't work with you, mate, that I can just like sell you, because it's not, it's
fair enough.
I'm not selling myself. You're a really good guy, Noel, and I'm really honored to have him here all the time. He really supports this company. Community. He really loves Norway. He's doing a lot of cool stuff with United Influencers, and a lot of good relationships have started. I don't know why, what the connection is. You love Norway, really, and it's great to have you here all the time.
Thank you.
And to see you do some really cool stuff. So again, thank you, Noel, and look forward to your talk.
Cool. Thank you so much for the intro. No expectations set at all. So I actually had to create my own slide. I'm a font Nazi, so I have to be very specific about these things. So as Scott already said, I work with United Influencers now. How many of you guys have already heard of United Influencers? Okay, cool. Fair few of you. So the whole thing actually happened last year when I came to WordCamp Norway, and there was a series of events that succeeded that, whereby 2 weeks later I got to meet the United Influencers crew. One thing led to another, and us, Human Made, as this VIP WordPress agency, became a partner of United Influencers. And partner in the sense that we have equity, and in that sense we're invested in the business, right? We really care about its long-term success. So United Influencers has grown quite a bit, right? So in our time now, it's already expanded to Sweden, it's expanding into Finland now. Everything's growing pretty fast. Most of the large bloggers in Norway and Sweden are on our platform, so I guess we're responsible to, for, I think it's around like 20 million page views per month at this point. And about, in the evenings, we'll see about 5,000 people on the website in real time. So it's quite a lot of stuff to take on board, and everything's grown quite quickly. So in many ways, the project in itself, from a web design point of view, is the perfect storm, right? Because on one hand, you have 200 influencers that all have different opinions. They come from different categories. They're used to doing things differently. They're used to having their WordPress site with their different plugins and whatever theme they had. And on the other side, you have a startup trying to bring all those together, but a startup by nature is already resource constrained, right? So you're trying to merge these two things together so that you come out on top and actually have a platform that's functional, right? So before we dive into how to deal with these sort of challenges, I'd like to talk, or take a step back a bit and talk about the problems that we encounter on a day-to-day basis designing websites for clients. How many people here actually create websites for other people? Okay, fair few of you, which is good. So let's look at this chart real quick. This is a super popular chart. It's been around for forever. Yeah, have a look. So how many people agree with this chart, and in general, in terms of how it works? None of you want to put your hand up. You know it's coming, right? You're like, Noel's gonna be like, no, fuck this. This is terrible. Yeah, it's terrible. From my point of view, because I don't agree with it at all. And not so much the last bit, which is the search engine submission, right? Because that's definitely your job right there. But it implies a sense of finality, right? That you've worked on a website and you're done, right? So that you can somehow, have all the right ideas from the moment you start it, and when you launch it, that website is exactly what that business needs and exactly what the consumers or the readers of that website need to have to interact with it. So I thought this was pretty interesting. I then looked at because this was posted on Reddit too, so I looked at the top comments. And I think the comments are glorious because they explain this perfect sort of situation of why this is a massive problem, right? So I can't see it from here, but I'll pop over here. Yeah, so there's a redesign phase, right? So it implies that the client notices the website doesn't quite work the way they want it to work, so they want something changed. And then it's going to repeat itself, makes sense too. Then there's a whole sort of implication that, but we're the web designer, we're the contractor, so we need to defend ourselves from a contract perspective, right? We're not saying, hey, we're a partner of you guys and we're working together to create the best possible website over time. We're just doing this one piece. We've done our work. We're out. So it's very interesting because just these comments alone tell this massive story, right? And I think that this leads us to our first problem. That there's this idea that the first version of your website or the first version of a complete redesign is final, right? And because of how agencies and clients are set up with their contracts and you know the way they work together, it's mostly that case, right? But it doesn't make sense, right? Because websites are not a one-off thing. I know it's easy to take a WordPress, a theme, and plugins, and a server, and put it all together and call it a website, right? But it's not quite that. So it's more of an evolving product. And so in that sense, why do we have relationships with clients like that, where we're not part of the longer journey, and we're just there for that small piece, right? If you could somehow create a website that is really perfect off the bat and is able to predict 3 months from now how people will use that website, then you could tell the future, right? You wouldn't need to be sitting in this room right now. You could be doing something completely different, playing the stock market or something else, but you wouldn't be here. So this whole idea of this chart is completely wrong, right? It's more likely to be something like this, right? Whereby the initial work should be a lot smaller because you're testing assumptions that you're actually testing assumptions before making further assumptions based on previous assumptions, right? And that's how a lot of web projects have this sort of bubble, I guess, where they build up so many assumptions that at one point you get to that part where you've launched and then the client's not happy and it's like redesign, right? So that's the whole phase that the comments were talking about before. But what's interesting is if we put it like this, it starts looking like the lean startup cycle, right? So websites are essentially products. And this is what I really advocate when you're building websites, that you treat them as a product, that you give them that sort of respect, and that you start small and you iterate your way into strong decisions, right? And products that are done like that, withstand time in a great way. So, Coca-Cola over the years, right, has completely, changed packaging, I guess, over such a large amount of time, but the product has actually remained, or the core product has remained the same. They've just played with packaging so much, right? iPhones, right? We've actually witnessed this entire movement or shift, I guess, or evolution of this product. Norwegian fine dining, right? All favorites. So the criticism here is obviously that ongoing development is expensive. How could you expect to be part of this client relationship for so long? People only have a set budget of 5,000, 20,000, 50,000, whatever it is. And I guess the logical sort of reasoning that's wrong here is that doing this sort of one-off project, which has this very high cost, is actually a very large amount of money that's lost because you're not testing these assumptions in any way, shape, or form, right? So if you start a lot smaller, but then you have a retainer, let's say over time, that you build monthly to continually iterate over the website as if it were a product, you then have a more healthy product. You have a healthier relationship with the client. You don't have these sort of shocks of need a complete redesign, need to completely change this or that, because you've worked together with the client to move towards that direction. So that's the first problem. The second one is this idea of WordPress being a sandbox, right? And this is something that's very specific to WordPress, right? And I think it's quite typical for startups or small to medium-sized company websites to do a lot of this stuff, whereby they treat WordPress as a sort of a plugin playground, I guess, where it's just oh, this plugin looks cool, I'm gonna add this and add that and add these other things. And then when the day of the grand finale comes you remember that chart before, where you launch the website and all of a sudden there's 40 plugins on there and the site doesn't work so well and you don't quite know what's going on and there's just too many moving parts. you really buried yourself in a hole, right? It's a lot harder to take away features from someone than it is to, over time introduce new ones. So this sort of technological debt sucks, right? It's a complete drain. If you have a couple options in one plugin, you have a couple options in another plugin, both of these plugins affect the design of the website. Over time, you're going to have multiple different versions or combinations that are possible of the website that you have to maintain, right? So you have all this sort of conditional design that comes into place that is going to start costing you money and time, right? Which you don't want to get yourself into. And on our side with United Influencers, yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because we have well over 100 influencers on the platform, and they've all come in with different ideas, or they come from different categories, right? One might be fashion, another one's cooking, so they have different needs and different requirements. So we can't quite go to medium.com route, right? Everybody's saying medium.com. Someone like Melinda Gates or someone like Bono both have the exact same design, and that's the end of the story, right? There's no options or anything like that. This is just what it is. But in our case, we have to, provide a couple options, but we have to do so in a manner that is well argued into, and in the sense that we've discussed it. There's no other way than to create that option and then move down that route. Not just always saying, hey, all right, let's just create another option for it, because then we get into this whole cycle where we have too many options, death by preference. And then the project starts slowing down again, right? Because we have too much debt. This is a pretty good image because it rings so true, right? One of the things we did not too long ago, that was a mistake on our part, was we had a new influencer come on board. They had a theme that they really wanted, and it was imperative that they were able to retain their theme. So the mentality is, for most people is, okay, we install a theme and we're done, right? Which is the top level element here. But the real work comes then in that, hey, look, we still have to hook it up with adaptive images that we have. We still have to hook in all the advertising and all the different kinds of advertising we have into that theme. So we have to start hacking around on this template. We have to do a code review on the theme. So we found out that it used Tim Thumb at one point, which is bad news, right? So we have to strip that kind of stuff out. So you have all this other stuff that comes in, right? And if you have too many of those things, obviously, it becomes a very painful process for your business, because you really, really slow down. Luckily, we only have, things like that once in a while. And usually what happens is that we as a team, both from the development side, both from the business side, we learn and make better decisions in the future. Even just today, we have 46 plugins off the bat, right? That someone may have. A lot of those are must-use plugins, obviously. So a lot of things that go into like the core technology of the stack, the infrastructure. But then there's other things, third-party plugins, which don't have much use in the larger world, but they're used by a couple influencers. So these things have to be reviewed, they have to be taken care of, updated. So it is quite easy to really get a lot of things going at one point. So these are the two challenges I find with most web design. And you don't really feel that pain often because you're working on a website with, I don't know, 5 or 10 pages and a blog, some news and stuff, and there's maybe 2 or 3 people managing it. So you don't really see that often. In this case, we see it quite a lot, right? Because we just have so many moving parts, and there's so many people involved, and there's so many different opinions or paradigms that come into it. So the way forward for us, I think the sort of lessons learned that we've had, dealing with so many people and trying to create a platform or a product or a web product that's completely built on WordPress, and where people are used to running WordPress and they still use WordPress today, but trying to get them to the point that, hey, this is a product and not the sandbox. There's a lot of things we've had to do there. And one of the first things I think is that any project like this needs an owner, right? Someone who's willing to challenge a lot of the ideas, try to maintain a sort of coherency to the whole thing moving forward, right? So if we have 200 people on a team, and a few of those have split personalities, so that's like 220 opinions. We then get to the point that there's just way too much going on. So every project in this regard really needs an owner. So even if you're a freelancer, you work for an agency or whatever it is, you have to be part of the decision-making process. If you're not part of the decision-making process, then it's probably not a good project for you to learn on and to evolve on and to move forward on. It's probably a project to pay the bills, but it's not a good project for you to actually grow on, right? You have to be part of the website as a product. I think I have an empty slide. That's a bit ridiculous. Oh no, I don't. Here we go. So the other thing I want to talk about is when you're being an owner is that you should also have this sort of mission statement or these sort of guiding principles that whatever idea comes around from the client or whoever it is, that you can check that idea against those guiding principles. And in our case, for what we do with regards to the themes on United Influencers, we want the reading and user experience to be paramount, right? So that is the most important thing. So me as a product owner of the whole web platform will say no to advertising off the bat. But then there's the financial reasoning that we get into. We argue it through and things make sense, so we introduce advertising, right? But at least that discussion takes place. Other things are, what is this? There we go. Social engagement, obviously, so that's a big thing. So anything that helps promote the blogs or the themes, towards social platforms such as Facebook, mostly Facebook actually. That's really what you guys love using out here, so it also makes sense. And the last thing that we also check against is extending the journey. So when people land on any United Influencers page, that they're able to continue moving, through the ecosystem, if you want, so that they've landed on one blog post, but they're interested or they become curious as to who is the influencer, who is this person writing about it, are there related posts that make sense in this context that we can link them towards, just trying to retain this piece of traffic so that it starts developing into an audience, right? As opposed to just being this through flow of traffic. So with these three things in mind, it's quite easy to reject a lot of ideas, right? So something like, let's say, an influencer would want revolving or sliding headers on their blog or theme. Does that contribute to any of the three previous ideas? No. So we can check against that and say, look, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't hold up against the mission statement, so to speak, and we can put that aside. So in that regard, sometimes the best offense is a strong defense, right? At one point, yes, you own the project and all that, but there's a certain point where you're going to start looking at analytics. You're going to start checking all the numbers, seeing how the traffic is, and I think one of the biggest things here is that analytics can be really daunting, right? You can look at Google Analytics and see a ton of data, and the big mistake that I think a lot of people make is that they assume that the data in analytics is insights, right? It's already carries some kind of value or decision in the process, but it doesn't. It's pure data. So it's quite dangerous to look at that data and then infer a lot of things out of it. So especially for us, because we have so much diverse data, it's important to retain the focus on items that really have that are really outliers or really stand out, if you want. So one of those things, if that's what you're cool, is traffic by device. A very simple thing. In our case, it's almost, I think we're at 76 or 78%, mobile or tablet traffic. I mean, that's a pretty significant amount of, people coming through. But then when you talk to people about their websites, it's always on the laptop, right? It's always looking at a laptop, and it's always like looking at a desktop view, and that's how they judge the design of their site. So when I have meetings with influencers, I always try to discuss their website by using my phone as opposed to a desktop. like my Mac or whatever, to really be able to really push through the idea that this is the most important real estate, right? And we can drill down further on that, and the FYI here, 46%, that's iPhones. So 46% of our platform is iPhones. So we can really, really target that sort of device, right? But we can drill that down further because there's data again here that separates out quite a lot. And in terms of our traffic, most people enjoy reading the article feed, right? So it's like the typical feed that you guys all know from WordPress, where there's 10 posts on one page, there's pagination, you go to the next page, and that's what it is. People love being on that page. What's interesting is if we take away the top 3 influencers, then the article view becomes the most important one again. So already here, we're starting to get a very specific mission in terms of what our priorities are. It's the article view on a mobile device, preferably an iPhone. We need to optimize for this in a very big way. And when I started with United Influencers, one of the things that was quite interesting was that there was this home builder or page builder kind of construct that they had, and they were very focused about it, right? There's a lot of discussions about it, but it just doesn't receive that much traffic, right? So from a cost or resource perspective, it doesn't make sense to pursue other things, even if they seem fancy or if they seem to have some sort of allure to them. Maybe an influencer seeing that, hey, someone else does this, I want it too. And with numbers like this, you can quite easily change the conversation and be, look, like 90% of our traffic is occurring on this article view in one shape or another. So we really need to focus on this. And for a lot of client projects, that's the same story. You can look at a lot of legacy analytics to really understand what is your starting point, right? Where are you going to start this small test, this initial project of what this web redesign is going to be, or this new website. Yeah. So another thing, which is I think really, really important when it comes to what we do, is that there's no story in data whatsoever. People love to think that we can reason objectively. We can look at data and be like, yes, this is this happened because of that, or this happened because of this. But we know we're kind of lying to ourselves, right? Because it's so much more than that. Let's take an example. Let's say this is a bounce rate. Good? Bad? Anybody have an opinion? No? Bad? Okay. I think it's interesting, because for bounce rates typically have this sort of negative connotation, right? That a higher the bounce rate, the worse it is. But if you have a single page app, obviously you're gonna have 100% bounce rate, right? If you have a page where you're trying to convert people on and already have them interact and do everything there, then a high bounce rate is also valuable. In our case, traditionally a higher bounce rate is more negative, but it's very interesting to see how stories are formed around very simple numbers. Let's take the bounce rate for one influencer over the last 30 days. So you can see it goes up and down. Next logical thing, if we're looking at something like this to try and understand it, would be to look at the page views, right? And we can see, okay, there's sort of inverse correlation, right, between the two. But this is not actually the story we're looking for, right? Because these are outliers that we can reason for. We can look into the data. We can see, hey, which pages were this? Who are the referrers on that? Did the traffic come from VG, Aftenposten, whatever it was? Was there some kind of news piece that made that happen, right? That's easy to figure out. The real part that's a challenge to figure out is this part here, right? The normal traffic. So when you have 200 influencers that are all different, how do you account for or try to optimize something like bounce rate or sort of engagement on the website when the percentages only change slightly, right? And that's only gains you could make even if you were to optimize the website. So you have to be really, really cautious when looking at data. And extrapolating this whole bounce rate idea further, these are all so these are not all the bounce rates for all articles, but for the top 5,000 articles from last year, mapped out. So again here, we can see that there's already a slight correlation between the amount of